And finally he looks over at me and he goes, Trevor, I suck at golf too, but it doesn't mean I don't like to play. That it opened my eyes to a lot of things. It's like, it's yeah, you don't have to be, you just have to enjoy what you're doing. I suck at golf, but every now and then I put a really good shot in.
That was Trevor Covich describing why you don't have to be an expert spey caster to find success with steelhead fishing. For some reason, I never get tired of a good steelhead chat. This is the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show.
Welcome to the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show, where you discover tips, tricks, and tools from the leading names in fly fishing today. We'll help you on your fly fishing journey with classic stories covering steelhead fishing, fly tying, and much more.
Hey, how's it going, everyone? Thanks for stopping by the Fly Fishing Show today. Trevor Covich, one of the best-known steelhead guides on the OP, is here to share some tips on finding fish during high water. This is one of the best shows we've had and one of the first ones on the OP, so this is going to be good to dig into it today. We find out how to tell if a steelhead is ready to bite by how it rolls in the water, what diamond chop is all about, and the best place to find fish that most people are skipping. This one is definitely jam-packed with some value bombs, so please share it with one other person today. And without further ado, here's Trevor Covich.
How's it going, Trevor?
Everything's good here. Just waking up with some coffee in Washington.
That's right. Where are you at? In Washington?
Well, I'm based out of Forks, which is generally where I run my winter steelhead business. And then usually at this time I'm up in Alaska. And of course, through the virus and everything that's gone on this year, a lot of seasons have been canceled all over Alaska. So I'm kind of sitting this one out. It's the first time in 17 seasons I've never gone up. So it's a huge change. It's a huge change to put it lightly.
Wow. And is the reason that you're not going up there just some lodges chose to close down and some lodges are staying open?
Yeah, absolutely. And then I work for a couple different lodges, but the first one is ran by a native corporation, and they really are, they tend to be really cautious on these things, and then also we have a lot of clientele that's generally older. The majority of our clientele is older. So, just to play it safe, they bowed out, of the chinook season, and then, the mid season also bowed out as well, because, there you work next to a native village, in Quinnahock, and then the village itself, the elders didn't want a lot of outside folks coming in, which is understandable. Oh, yeah. So they made sure there was no operations running.
There you go. Yeah, that's probably the smart move given where we're at. Things are kind of spiking a little bit again. We're in.
It's going up, especially and up there. You know what I mean? It was starting to creep down to where I thought that things were gonna go, and then all of a sudden it kind of switched, and then they pulled the plug on it.
Dang. Okay. Well, we'll probably dig into a little bit of that as we go. I wanted to, we'll probably talk about, I guess, the OP, and I mean, you kind of split it between the OP and the and Alaska. Is that pretty much how you do it?
That's what I do now. I used to travel around a lot when I was younger, and I missed being in the Northwest, and I missed seeing my family. If you're always traveling, you're never seeing your folks, and then they every time you see them when you get off a plane, they're physically older. So I eventually quit going around to a bunch of places, and I started my guide business out in Forks, which is a place that I've been steelhead fishing for a while. Like, I was a steelhead bum out here for like 7 years, when I was a teenager, and then and loved it. And so I just do that pretty much. Like, November is kind of an off month for me, but like, I start guiding in December down here, and then it goes all the way through April. So it's a cold, wet disease, but it's awesome.
Yeah, that's right. I was just talking to somebody yesterday on a call. I was doing a little coaching call with somebody. I've got another podcast that I do, and And he's in North Carolina, and he is fishing. He's a guide out there for, fish in North Carolina, but he's got a friend that just moved out from Portland, and he was talking about steelhead, and he's got the steelhead bug now, so he's jacked up, and especially now that we're getting into a little summer steelhead action, that's good. But well, we're gonna take it. Let's take us back a little bit. So we're gonna get into the Spey and kind of all the micro and everything around Spey. But how'd you get into fly fishing? Start us off there.
Well, I was my father and my uncles were outdoorsmen. My dad was more of a gear guy, loved the salt water. My uncle, John Covich, he runs the Cuba side of fly water travel. He's the guy who really put a fly rod in my hand, and he would take my brother and I fishing for like a week or two every summer to some place. And then I think I was 6 years old when I finally started actually casting a fly rod. My dad would put me on his flow tube in a lake, and he'd fish around, and then when he'd hook a fish, he'd let me reel it in, or he'd troll me around or whatever. And it wasn't until I but when John started taking my brother and I, we really started kind of hiking around and learning how to properly cast and present flies and stock fish and tie flies. Like John was the guy who he bought me these two Randall Kaufman fly tying books. One was a nymph book, one was a dry fly book. And so that was my instruction there. And then I also did some there was a local fly shop where I grew up in Issaquah, Washington. It was called Creekside Angling. And the owners, Pete Corbett and Hugh Pastoriza, they would hold these fly tying classes. And it'd be me and like 3 or 4 other kids in there, in the evening. And we'd tie woolly buggers and Mickey fins and pretty much whatever else, but it was just the basics. Pretty much.
That's cool.
And then it kind of just went on from there,
That's really cool. So yeah, you got kind of a family. I mean, and John, your uncle, is still over at still at Flywater.
Yeah, he's still at Flywater, and then he's repping a couple other things as well. But what he really loves to do is take people down to Cuba, and then his photography and his drone stuff's really good.
Oh, cool.
And then of course he's got 2 sons. That are, kind of, one just graduated, one's about to, and then his son just got a job up north this year in one of the places that are still operating.
Oh,
and
gotcha.
He's kicking ass, so he's just loving it.
There you go. You guys, it sounds like you guys got a little Covich fly fishing dynasty going on.
It's well, no, it's just I don't know if it's in our DNA, but. Yeah. But it drives us forward. It's just a fun way of life. Yeah. Yeah. It's not easy, but it is fun.
Yeah. That's cool. That's cool. Okay. So yeah, I guess starting out, well, let's just take it back. So you're kind of, you sounds like you've been in fly fishing, a good chunk of your life. I mean, now you're the kind of OP Alaska. How did, did you grow up out there up in Forks?
So my father bought into this small piece of property out in a place called Sequoia, Washington, which is right on the Strait of Juan de Fuca. And it was right on the Sequoia River. And he went in on a piece of property with 3 of his buddies from Boeing. They were all Boeing mechanics. And they were all saltwater guys. And so we'd go out fishing, we'd go out at 5 a.m, go fishing out in the saltwater, and then come back, and we'd be limited out by, 9 or 10. Well, then we had the whole rest of the day to do stuff. Well, the Sequoia River was right there, and so my brother and I would blow up our float tubes at the time, and then we'd go paddle around out here, and it's like a tidal slough.
Oh wow!
And then we go fish sea run cutthroat, and then every now and then there was a silver. And I remember one time my brother he was skating it was a stimulator, and I think I can't remember how old we were, but and then a summer steelhead actually grabbed a stimulator, and this one we were just little kids, and we had no idea what it was. We just figured it was a salmon. And then and so that was kind of a summer thing, And then one time we had to go do some work out there, and it was in December, and I went and went up looking up the road and stuff like that, kind of just looking for cutthroat trout. And I was with my cousin, and I just had a trout rod, and I just remember throwing out there, and next thing I knew, I had something really big on, and it was working me. You know what I mean? Yep. Took me under a log jam, came back out, went back in the log jam, and finally screwed it up on the sand, and it was probably a 12, 13 pound wild steelhead.
Wow.
It was a hen, and it was just, and I was sitting there going, and I think I was 12 or 13 at this time. And that was the moment I kind of knew that I wasn't going to be doing any more snowboarding, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so that was kind of the, that was the spark. And so when I got my driver's license, I would try and find any way possible to go out there. So me and a couple buddies would, every now and then we ditch school, on Friday, and then head over for a long weekend. And then we'd fish for steelhead, and it was awesome. I mean, it was really good. And kind of the common trend now, that river, which was really awesome. Of course, it's not so awesome anymore. It's to the point where, I want to go fish it, but I don't fish it anymore, just because it's not even close to what it used to be. And where my deck's situated is right in front of, like, there's probably 3 nets that'll be right out front. So it's just like, and so now it's more of a vacation spot. I've been taking my girlfriend and one of her friends out there, and we've just been trout fishing lately. But my main thing now is, so I bought a house in Forks, and so I operate right here, and I've got rivers a stone's throw away from me. So It's really easy for me to go take guys to wherever I want. And then I've got, a downstairs where I keep my clients.
Oh, cool.
For the most part, so they can just roll in. I don't got to go pick them up at a hotel, so it makes it really seamless.
That's awesome. What's the how was the winter steelhead season there this year on the OP?
Oh, it was good. Every year's different, and then everybody's going to have their own outlook on what they would feel good is. The winter steelhead thing, and especially the winter steelhead thing out here, especially if you're swinging a fly, is extremely tough. Just the fish move in weird ways out here. Yeah. You know what I mean? They don't sit still for long. And then you have the constant changing of weather and water conditions. Like, I'll just give you this season's example of weather. So I lost the majority of January out here because of big water, constantly blown out. There were pictures of the Quileute, and the Bogashil overflowed, and that whole lower end of the road down there was totally swamped with water, and then of course the power goes out, and then February comes along. February is a great month. So you get some mixed rain, good water conditions. And then March came along, and March was like it does sometimes. There's barely any rain. You know what I mean? And so what it does is it stuffs fish up in certain places. And so depending on the time of year and then the water flow, it depends on kind of where I'm going to be with my clients, and the rivers change.
Yeah.
So.
And that's the cool thing about the OP is that there's a number of different rivers, and depending on the condition and how things are going, you can adjust accordingly, right? That's the...
Exactly.
Do you find guys, what percentage of guys up there do you find just for fly fishing that are nymph fishing versus swinging? Well,
it used to be really one-sided. There wasn't many swing guys. There were some swing guys out here, but not really swing guides, and then but the majority were you got your gear guys, and then you got nymphers that would solely nymph, and then and some guys would do some swinging. And then it wasn't until like when Jerry French started putting in a full campaign out here and started to be really successful, you know, and then also still, you know, taking his beatings like most steelheaders do, you know, but like Jerry was the guy who opened my eyes to a lot of stuff. Like I thought I was a pretty good steelhead fisherman when I met Jerry, and then Jerry French was the guy who got me thinking about things a little differently. And then also, especially with the fly time too, you know, he's the master when it comes to that kind of stuff. But he really got me thinking about where they're sitting, how long they're sitting, you know, stuff like that. But I would say that in the last 3 to 4 years, the swinging contingent has gone up tenfold.
Oh,
okay.
Wow.
Like now there's like, it used to be me and Jerry and then, you know, 1 or 2 other guys. And now there's a whole bunch of new, you know, swing guides out here.
There are.
And so the pressure kind of that, you know, it just gets more and more pressure. And so I have to start doing things that are a little more crafty, you know, just to try and kind of get away from people sometimes. But every now and then you end up on a stretch of river and you're all by yourself because everybody decided to go to the same boat launch on a certain river and some other place is left totally empty. It's really cool.
So there were a few guides back in the day, and now there's more. I mean, do you know all these guys pretty much? Do you talk to all these guys? You know, kind of know them personally?
No, I try and have a really good rapport with people just in case. You gotta get along with people that you work around, or else it's not going to be fun for anybody. B, if you get in trouble and you need help, or vice versa, like it's good to have friends. And so, no, I try and talk to everybody. And of course I have a main core group of buddies out here that, you know, swing flies that I would share information with, and a couple of gear guys they're good friends of mine. But, you know, we stay pretty zipper lipped when it comes to sharing that kind of stuff, or else
Oh yeah,
somebody will be there the next day. So
that's right. That's cool. And I'll put a link in the show notes. I had Jerry French on recently, and I've had a number of kind of the big names in the Spey game on, you know, and you're a name that's been popping around there. I just, you know, finally got getting you on here to talk about this. So that's great. I can't remember who I connected with recently that mentioned your name, but you know, there's all sorts of ways to do it, right? You got the long bill. I just had Bruce Kruk on, who was talking all about the long belly lines, right? Is
he the guy who's in the Upper Columbia?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I look at his stuff on I think it's either Facebook or Instagram. That water looks awesome.
Exactly.
I gotta fish it one day.
Yeah, I know he's a big, and we talked a little bit about the clear water and all that stuff. But I think all those guys. I mean, the OP is such a amazing place. I think everybody, it's on their list, right? Each year they're probably heading down that way. So it sounds like as it gets busier, you know, what are the tips for, you know, I mean, for somebody who's out there trying to find more of a remote experience? Any tips there?
Well, if you're willing to get out and hike around, if you're trying to get away from people, I mean, you might want to stick to maybe, you know, there's some smaller streams out here you could go look at. But the thing is like, you got to be, if you want to get away from people, you got to fish in the conditions that are not favorable. That's the one thing that separates the good anglers and the good guides from the weekenders. Okay. Yeah. Meaning, some of my best days here and some of the days where I catch my biggest fish here are when the water is extremely high. Because what it does when the water's really high, well, two things have happened, right? So if the water is high and fishable, chances are a couple days before it was pretty muddy. Okay. Meaning nobody's fishing, there's no nets, and because all the logs get stuffed up in the nets, right? And so nobody's fishing. So once it gets back into shape, fish are generally going to be sitting in places because they've come in and they haven't been messed with at all. The big fish thing, what happens? So if a river's low, those big fish have to be in certain lies, right, to feel safe. When the water's high, it's an open freeway, and what it does is it sucks those fish really close to the bank. And some of the biggest fish I've ever taken out here with clients have been within 5 to 10 feet of the bank when the water is giant. Meaning, like, and when the water's giant, you've got a swing run that is, let's say it's usually 35 to 40 yards. Well, now it's 10 to 15 yards, because if you go down too far, you're gonna start floating. So it's that's why this whole season down here is what I call my Super Bowl, because it's the hardest guiding I do all year. Just having to doing the mental gymnastics around the conditions, right, and knowing where I should be at what time of year, and then what spots are going to be swinging at this flow versus that flow. Yep. Okay. And then you've got guys who are fishing around you, and then you know what spots those guys like. And so, like, if I'm on a run of water with my buddy Gray Struznik, like, I'm going to be talking to him and asking where he's going to be going versus where I'm going to be going. That way we can line our days out and then not be stepping on each other's toes. Yep. And then that way all of our clients get a good shot at some fish. So
that's great. Yeah, that's a good tip there. So basically fishing the inside water. What lines would you be using if the water is really high? And you're talking about, so the water blows out, it's muddy, and then it's just coming. As soon as it comes down, it is getting the mud's gone, but it's still, you can only see maybe a foot. That's what you're talking about, but it's still raging.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's still raging. So and a lot of people will tell you that you got to go super light, which in some spots you absolutely should. But the problem is sometimes when the water's up, it's also got some more flow going to it. Okay. And so you kind of got to hold it in there. And so sometimes I'm still using, 10 to 12 feet of T14. Other times I'm using 5 and 5. It all changes with the spots. Okay. And then when the water's up like that and slightly offset, I mean, I'm using a foot a leader. We're not doing 4 foot leaders. I rarely go above 4 feet. And then I'm a 20 or nothing guy. Meaning if it's not 20-pound test, I don't want it on your sink tip at all. Not even close, because for a few reasons. First reason is, like, some of my clients are super novice casters, right? Okay. So it's flying out, they're funny. And then sometimes there's going to be some knots that show up, some that I didn't see, or else I would have to check it like every other cast or keep changing their leader, and fish will bust 15-pound with a wind knot. But what I tell people, or what I show them in the boat, is I'll take 15-pound test and I'll take 20-pound test, and I'll tie a wind knot in it, and I'll go break this one and then try and break that one. So you prepare for the fish that you want to catch versus the fish you're probably going to catch, because the really big fish that are out here, they just show up, and you've just got to be ready, because your next cast could be the biggest fish of your life and then your fishing guide's life out here. You just never know when it's going to happen.
That's it.
So we're prepared.
So if you're fishing that, say again, you're at the high water, you're fishing a T14, something pretty heavy. What line are you using? Are you kind of doing all the OPST stuff?
Well, I used to do a lot of that stuff. I've been gravitating and trying out some SA lines, but it's pretty early in the stages of that. I still like the OPST lines. It's what I really started on as far as the shorter lines. Before that it was a skagit flight. But the commando head is what opened up a lot of different things for me, especially on the single hand side, too.
Are you what can you just walk us through again, just for an example? Let's just think of that high water. You're on the OP and you're fishing one of those higher, the river's way up, but what rod are you using, weight, and can you just talk about that just generally? So for the most part, anywhere on the peninsula, I use a 12-foot 9 weight. That's the thing. I used to use a 12.5, but as
as I fish more and as I get older, I start gravitating towards shorter rods. It's gotten shorter and shorter and shorter since I started Spey casting. So I'm going to use a 12-foot 9-weight just in case, because like, for example, when the water's high and let's say you're on the Soul Duck River, well, the Soul Duck River doesn't have these broad gravel bars. Okay. So you're going over big rocks, you got logs coming out, and then you've got, a bunch of grass and trees. And so I want to be able to put my anchor way out there, and I want to be able to make a fishable cast with minimal effort. Okay. And then also with the water being up and then being kind of offset. Now I'm going to throw a monstrosity. I'm going to throw a monstrosity of a fly. Just because I want them to see it. And then I want my clients to be able to hold their flying long enough to where they can get a good look at it. And then sometimes that means also holding it down below you for a few seconds, because there's plenty of current, and said some of these fish will be right next to the bank. But it's all 12 foot. It's all 12 footers for me. But most of my clients will bring out 13.2, or is the general.
Yeah, that's the typical. Yeah. So the advantage of the 12 foot versus the 13, what is the advantage there if you're fit in that situation?
Well, you're not going to be chopping wood as much. That's the main thing. Okay. You got all these low hanging tree branches. Every time you smack your rod on it, it takes the life of your rod down a notch, and then you're always wondering in the back of your mind what cast is it going to be, or is it going to be when you go set on that fish that you really want to get in, and now you've got half a rod. But no, it's mainly just being able to put your anchor where you want to. Okay. With a shorter rod, and a shorter line, I can place my anchor exactly where I want to. I can poke way out. And when I poke out, if it didn't get out as far as I want it to, I'll just come around again and poke out further. And then I'll just do a roll cast when everything's really tight. But mainly it's just mainly doing nice fishable casts. That's the next thing. Fishable casts, not casting as far as you can every single time. Like, it's silly to me. It actually drives me nuts, and it drives a lot of people nuts out here, especially if you're guiding. Everybody wants to cast a long line. I mean, it's fun. It looks super cool, but if you really want to catch fish, you're going to make a good presentation, and you're gonna search as many spots as you can.
Yeah. I hear you. We had that conversation with Bruce Kruk. He was talking about fishing his water, which actually it is an advantage of casting way out there, because some of those fish are further out, and he's also a Spey. He's at the Speyorama, and that's a whole different thing. Those guys are just they just love.
It's casting. A whole nother can of worms.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, yeah, exactly. But here, and I'm sure it's advantage up here. But what people don't factor in here is the traveling lane. Okay, that the traveling lane is just as important as the holding water, and sometimes said they're right at your feet. That's where they're moving.
Yep, right in next to the bank a lot, kind of within that.
Off your rod tip.
Yeah. Right
off your rod tip, and then the traveling lane changes. That's the next thing. As the river rises and falls, you got to be able to rise and fall with it. Okay, meaning the traveling lane is going to be here at this CFS at 3,500 CFS, and it's going to be over here at 1,250. Okay, so if you're not on top of that, you're going to be out of it.
And how are you learning? You obviously are up there every day and stuff, but if somebody's new, their first time the OP, they're heading up to whatever river, and it's one of these rivers that's changing quite a bit, how are they, and how do you do it, right? The river changes. How do you find that new lane?
Oh, it's time on the water.
Yeah. It's
all time on the water. And it's going out when you don't feel confident going out. Like I said, when the water's messed up, every day you push your boat in or you go fishing, it should be a learning experience. Okay. So I'll be, when I'm guiding, for example, I'm not just watching my clients, I'm watching other parts of the river below me. Right. I've got binoculars as well. but I'm looking for rolling fish in certain places that I've seen them roll before, and then like, for example, out here, there's a slower roll and there's a faster roll. Okay. The faster rolls are the fish that are really moving and they're pushing. Other rolls are where fish are kind of like stuck in a spot and they're just kind of holding. And then, and generally rollers are eaters. Okay. Because the first thing about, steelhead fishing is knowing that they're there. You can fish all the best water in the world, and if your timing's not right and there's no fish there, you're not going to catch anything. And that's the thing that discourages a lot of people out here is they get to a great piece of water, they fish it, they catch nothing. They go back the next day, they fish it again, maybe a little differently, catch nothing. And so they go, you know what, there's nothing here. Well, on the third day, when they should have gone back, there was probably a fish there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I say time on the water.
Time on the water. So is that the tip? So basically, instead of going out and fishing, 6 different pieces of water, maybe if you had a 3 or 4 day trip, just stay on that one section, maybe that few mile section.
You should find a couple really good spots that you like and stick to them. And then if you stick to them, it's like it's like a slot machine. You pull it enough, okay, it's gonna hit. But it really is time on the water, and the reason that I've had the success that I've had out here is because of all the days that I've spent catching nothing and learning and being soaked, miserable, putting gas in my truck, hiking through brush, tearing my waders, and then in unfavorable conditions. And the guys that are really successful out here are the guys that put in their time. There's definitely some luck involved as well, like most fishing, but the guys that do well out here are the guys that put their time in, and they've struggled. Everybody out here, if you've ever swung a fly, has struggled. There are guys that I know that think they're really awesome, great fishermen, and they come out here and they get whooped. It's not a favorable place, but if you put your time in and you learn, like, you're going to see some pretty cool stuff. And not to mention, you just look around you. It's a visual masterpiece.
Yeah,
it really is.
It's an amazing area, because maybe paint that picture. Well, let's get into that, the visual masterpiece in a second, but I want to take it back to the Perry poke, right? You were talking about the poke. Can you describe the Perry, if Perry was who Perry was, and describe the Perry poke for somebody who's never seen that cast and why you do it?
Well, I guess the Perry poke apparently was made up from guys that blew their anchor set, you know what I mean? And so they would just dump it down. So a lot of times when, for example, if you're trying to set your anchor below you, and let's say you come up a little too strong and your fly goes whizzing by you upstream, well, then you can just take your rod and then poke it straight down in front of you, and then come out and around, and then do your cast. You can do it off any side, and then you can sit there and poke your rod like 3 times to get all your line just lined up right in front of you, and then just do that out and around and over the top and through. And the thing is, it's extremely powerful cast, like I said. And then it's also a cast that doesn't, if you keep your hands tight, you don't have to do a lot of ranging movements. You know what I mean? You can keep everything really tight to your body, and then the line will stick to the water, which is going to create a lot of load in your rod and a lot of bend.
Yeah, that's right. That's the thing. When I think of it, I guess I'm painting that picture again, where I'm thinking of this high water situation. I'm plowing through the brush down a steep cliff, and I drop in, and I'm, on river left, right? River's going from right to left, and I'm kind of top hand up, and I'm setting this thing up. So I do say a snap tee or something, and I do the poke and get it out there, and then I bring it back. And when you bring it back, basically, like you're saying, all this line, there's a lot of line on the water that you're pulling back, and that's
exactly,
that's a good thing, right?
Yes, absolutely. Because for example, like a big reason for like skagit lines. Okay, skagit lines are thick. Okay, so you got a lot of surface area. Okay, and so that's a lot of area for that water to grip your line, which is if you're a bow hunter, okay, you're loading up that bow to make your kill shot pretty much. So it's loading and loading everything. And you don't necessarily have to be sweeping fast with your rod, as long as you're constant. Even if you're slow, the water's gripping that line really nice. Okay. And then your release point is the same release point an NFL quarterback is going to have when he's trying to hit a receiver way down the field. Okay. Everything's in control until that last little bit, and it's the last extension is where I put all my maximum effort. And then you can also breathe out while you're doing it. And it'll just kind of, it'll give you that little extra juice. But yeah, you can punch out there. But the main thing is starting short, like all steelheading. Okay. Fish your feet. And then it doesn't, like, your casting does not, there's no ceremony out here. Okay. It's, can you make a fishable cast? Like, I don't care. I really don't care what it looks like. Okay. You could do some weird crap and throw it out there. And as long as it's where it needs to be, and you're mending when you have to, and you're holding it in, and then you're being patient by, if, when the time comes, like, every eat from a steelhead is going to be different, and you need to react accordingly, and it's really tough to keep calm when a fish is chewing on you. So
what you're saying is, you don't have to be fishing out there in this situation a perfect, turning that fly over just perfectly. I mean, you could pile one up and do it. Man, I ask this question occasionally because I know that, with like summer steelhead, you probably, if you're turning the fly over better and getting a beautiful cast, you probably are going to
totally
be
different game.
Yeah, totally different.
Yeah, it's a totally different thing. And like I said, these are, that's a whole nother realm from what the winter thing is. The winter is generally said you don't have to be a rock star caster. It helps to be a rock star wader.
Yeah.
In certain places, especially where you're at out here.
Yeah.
Or else you're going to be really, really wet. But if you can make a manageable cast, you're going to have a shot at some fish.
That's cool. See, that's kind of my dilemma. My dilemma is that I'm actually kind of a rock star wader. I'm not a great caster, but I love summer steelhead and I love winter. But if I had to pick one, I'd rather be in 90-degree weather swinging for summers. And you know what I mean? So I think I need to change. I need to either get better at casting or fish for winters more.
No, and then it's just, I know a lot of different steelhead guys, and and it's crazy, depending on, where you grew up or where you started fishing, kind of, one of my buddies, his name's Nick Rowell. He guides in the Deschutes.
Oh, cool.
Guy loves that place, and I've fished Deschutes a bunch, and it's a super, super magical place, that everybody should fish.
Yep.
But if I died and went to heaven, I'd be on a steelhead river out here somewhere or in BC. I really would.
That's it. I know, it's so cool. I love it because everybody's got their thing. So,
well, and also you don't have to deal with rattlesnakes and ticks out here.
Good point. Those are that's the thing in Oregon or in the Northwest. That's the thing. Go down to the South, go down to the Southeast or anywhere in the world, and there's things that can kill you. But in Oregon or in the Northwest, rattlesnakes are pretty much the only animal that can kill you.
Yeah, and then you'll have a random black widow every now and then. But for example, if like on the Deschutes, those rattlesnakes will buzz you from 10 feet, 10 yards away. Like, you go to the Grand Ronde. The Grand Ronde, I've always found to be a little different. I've never had a rattlesnake let me know that they were there. You know what I mean? I almost sat on one year. I was hiking up a ridge. I was setting up a camp for some steelheaders, and I hiked up on a ridge, and I sat down, and I looked right to the right of me, and there was a rattlesnake going right by me. He didn't even care, Yep. So damn. I'd rather know.
I've had it too. Well, on the Deschutes, I've had rattlesnakes laying there in the next to the river on my thermarest. I've had a rattlesnake go across my bedroll, and that's that's a little sketchy. But no, this is good. I love the rattlesnake tails and all that stuff. But hey, I wanted to take us back again. So line. So somebody's going, they want a line like we're talking about, a line for maybe these higher events that come up, like we're fishing. What is, if they want to just go buy one right now, what is the OPST line they could get?
Well, they could just go with they could just go with the commando
Just
head.
the commando head. Yeah.
They've got some newer stuff out, but so I don't work for those guys anymore.
Gotcha.
And then I've had a couple guys bring some of the newer stuff up, and I think it's more of an intermediate, which I'm not a fan of. I'm a fan of it in certain situations, mainly like for chinook or certain faster water, but really I just want a regular skagit line. Okay. Because you're going to be at a depth that I know. Okay. And then also, I would rather have a guy off the bottom than directly on it. I mean, most of those guys when they bring their intermediates out here, they're snagging up, where the fish should be.
Yeah, and I'm thinking about the one is the FIST, right? Is I think Air Flo is that kind of a
yeah,
a
the
typical?
FIST is cool. No, and that's a Sylvie line, I believe. And I remember I cast one at a Spey clave, and then I sent a message afterward because it was an absolute rocket. And talk about a line that sticks to the water, and I mean you can feel like a rock star, not only casting but holding your line where it needs to be. Like where I really like that line is for chinook, okay, because it digs, especially in the sun, especially in those deep tanks where those chinook really like to be. And they, chinook like fast and slow presentations depending on where they're at and how aggressive they are. But I definitely use the intermediates more up north doing the chinook thing than I do down here.
Gotcha. Yeah, you just want more control. And how do you? So if you need to get it down, are you mostly doing that depending where you're casting? Or are you putting heavier flies on?
Well, I do both. Okay, so I'll set up differently. I might do a couple mins in a step. I'll definitely put like a tungsten head on. But yeah, it all depends on the spot. Every spot's different, and then there's in every one of these spots out here, not everyone, but a lot of them, especially in certain water with more boulder structure, when a guy's fishing a piece of water, I'm pretty sure I know where that fish is going to be coming from. You know what I mean? And I try and lay it out for those guys to play it out. But yeah, I would some of those times, I think it's mainly when the water gets low is when I start fishing a lot deeper, because those fish get into some deeper stuff. Okay. And then, and it's a lot of places where, the gear guys get to extremely easy. They can just park on it and fish 12 feet. But when the water's low, those fish have to stack, and they got to be in certain places.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they get spookier and stuff like that. That's the nice thing about the high water is that. And so when you're fishing, so you're not fishing it when it's brown, but as soon as that color starts to clear, you're fishing the next morning.
Yeah. Oh yeah. We've caught them in 6 inches of viz out here. A foot's fine. 2 feet's really nice. For example, a lot of the gear guys out here they want a solid 4 feet of visibility. Okay. And 4 feet's great. Everybody's got the steelhead color they really like. And I just what I want is I want to look at the water and just barely see the boulders. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That's when I'm feeling super confident, because I know that those fish can be sucked in really tight right next to all that stuff. My guys can just pound through water and not beat themselves up by trying to cast, a country mile.
Right.
But yeah, give me 2 or 3 feet. I'm super happy. 2's great.
Yep. How do you, what fly are you putting on there? Or how big, maybe, and I know you've got some of your own flies, right? You have that you use.
Yeah, no, I keep it really basic. And then of course, a lot of my clients bring their own stuff too, but, I fish what's just called a guide fly. It's nothing special. It's just a single station. And then, with some hackles and then some flash on it in different colors. And then I put some weight on some, and then I put a lot of weight on others, and then a lot of them I keep unweighted. But what I like to do out here, I'm a big fan of controlling the fly with the sink tip, meaning I'll fish mostly unweighted flies out here. And then I'll put my tip on accordingly.
Right.
That way, because said everybody, like, if you snag up in the traveling lane, it's over. Okay. And the things that will really also chap a guide's ass is when you spent time tying these flies and you got a guy who he'll swing through and then he'll go look up at the clouds on the hang down, the fly will get stuck, or he'll step down.
Yep.
And then he'll get snagged up, and instead of trying to get the fly off or let me do it, he'll just snap it off and ask for a new one.
Damn.
Right. And so after a guy's done this a couple of times, you start not wanting to give that guy your nice flies.
Well, and also, man, snap it off on 20 pound. That's not easy to do.
It's not easy to do. And most of the time they straighten out the hook on that. And then I just have to change that. But I want to have a really nice fluid swing. Okay. And I don't always want to be grabbing, on the inside either. And then there's ways you can speed your fly up too, to keep it kind of off the bottom, without putting slack into it. So
is that kind of like mostly like leading the fly with your rod tip?
Well, it's leading the fly and then drop into the surface of the water and then moving your rod tip a foot back out. So what you've done is you've just created a sail or a bow. Okay. So for example, if you cast out there, let's say you throw a mend, okay, you sink it in there, it starts swinging really nice. Really nice. I'll downstream mend into shore, and then I'll drop my rod tip all the way to the water, and then I'll move the rod tip 1 foot back out to the middle. And what that does is it'll speed that fly right in. Especially like, for example, there's places where right at the bottom, it's actually pretty deep on the hang down. Okay. But there's not a lot of flow, and I'll do that same thing. And sometimes I'll bring it in, and sometimes I'll mend it back out, and then just let it kind of go back and forth below me if I think there's a fish down there or if something's rolling.
Yep. That's a cool tip, because when you get in close, you're not going to have the flow, and you can't lead it with your tip. So that's a cool tip.
No, you can't do it. No. And so that's why I'm really a fan of the unweighted stuff, but there's always a place for weighted flies. And then also, you got to think of your clients too. Okay. I have a lot of clients that don't like casting weighted flies. Okay. It feels clunky to them. It doesn't roll out as nice, as they want it to be. And you want your clients to enjoy it while still letting them, do their thing. Right. And you still want them to have success. If they're definitely not going to have success, I'm going to go, hey, like, I'm just going to say, George, I know you don't like doing this, but I feel like we're going to be in the game if we do this. Okay. And if they're smart, they're going to listen to their fishing guide.
Yep.
And then, but other guys, like I said, they've been trying really hard to be a better caster and be a better fisherman. And I had this one guy, he was not good at all. He was really horrible, fishing. And he's been spey fishing for like 8 years, and I've tried to help him numerous times, and finally he looks over at me and he goes, Trevor, I suck at golf too, but it doesn't mean I don't like to play. That it opened my eyes to a lot of things. It's like, it's you don't have to be, you just have to enjoy what you're doing.
Exactly.
It really is. Like, I suck at golf, but every now and then I put a really good shot in.
Exactly.
And then I drink some beers. So it's pretty good.
I love that take, because, like I was saying, I've had Bruce Kruk and some of these guys on who are outstanding they're casting a country mile. I mean, some of these guys, like Travis Johnson, right? He's got the 200 foot or whatever it is, right? This record. But,
Travis is an animal.
Yeah. Travis is crazy. And, but the point is that sure, if you want to go for that and you're enjoying it, then go for it. But if you're good just out there fishing and you're having fun, then do that.
And one thing I like about Travis is not only is he's not only just he was a wrestler, right? So he's built like a wrestler. He's super strong, and he can put a long line out there. But at the end of the day, he's a fisherman. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
Like, and so he's a guy like, if you're fishing the Sandy in Oregon, or you're fishing on the Deschutes, he's a good guy he's been doing it for a long time.
Yeah, he's been doing it. Yeah, definitely. So anything else? I mean, we're going to start to wrap this up here a little bit, I guess. Maybe we can just start off with the 222, which is top 2 flies, tips, and resources that I like to dig into before we get out of here. And you've mentioned a couple of fly. Well, you've mentioned your fly. Is there another fly if somebody just wanted to check out a fly that they can find online that might be good? Or do you pretty much stick with your fly?
I stick with my stuff generally, but if there was one other person, and I've already mentioned it, it would be anything that Jerry French ties for steelheading, mainly, for example, the Dirty Hoh flies.
That's right.
Which is, a fly he just developed out here on the Hoh. It's a leech, with a hot head on it, but it's got maximum movement, good hook placement, slight cone on it, and then a really nice shoulder. And so it has a wiggle factor. And and that guy's had an epic amount of success. And I use that fly, like he sells those through Aqua Flies. Right. And so, and that's a fly that you can use for steelhead and chinook, whatever. It doesn't matter. It's still got the same appeal depending on what anadromous fish you're going after. Here's an example. Like, I remember one time we were fishing the skagit, and he had fished this piece of water through, and he was reeling up, and reeling up, flies got a lot of wiggle, and I'm across the river from him, and his rod just jams down. He goes, dude, did you see that? And we all looked over, and thing came right back again and just nailed him. It was probably like a 14 pound buck, just super bright on the lower skagit. And but no, all his flies are tried and true. They're really strong. And then he's said he's put more time in the water than most people.
Yeah, no, he's got all. Just make another note. Yeah, Jerry. Well, I've been trying to tell a little bit of the story. You know all these guys, I'm sure, but George Cook told a little bit of the story, and we're all built on the top of the people that came before us, right? So you've got Harry Lemur and all the that crew.
The Godfathers of Spey.
Exactly. Yeah, the Godfathers of Spey.
And depending on where you are in the course of this history, like, for example, there were the guys that Edward and Jerry would I guess not look up to, but that came before them. Like George Cook was the first guy to ever put a Spey rod in my hand.
Wow.
I've known George since I was a little kid. I went fishing with him last spring out at Isaac's Ranch, which is a really cool place in Eastern Washington, where he does some guiding.
That's right.
But George, I love George.
Yep. Yeah, George's name. He seems to be one of the guys. I guess he's obviously in the kind of that other older generation out there. Who else is out there other than George who's at that similar? I'm trying to think, because it seems like George's name just keeps coming up when you talk about steelhead and Spey.
Because the thing about George, George is a rep, but George is the guy that I believe got Spey fishing to really explode out here. I mean, as far as people buying rods, I mean, George has been a salesman for a long time. He can kill anything that moves.
Yep.
And he's a good fisherman, and he's king of the one-liners. I mean, if you've ever spent around any time with George, you will, your mind will be exhausted after, because he's always pitching something or telling a joke, but George is great. And like I said, I wouldn't have touched a Spey rod as soon as I did until I met George, because George, he used to come up to the Connect Talk, we used to have these we were calling them Spey gurus. They'd come up and help our clients Spey cast, and like another one of those guys was Charles St. Pierre.
Yep.
You've ever heard of that guy? Mm-hmm. Charles, they call him the doctor. I mean, he's he can line out your Spey cast and really fix all the problems. And that's what a really good Spey instructor is is going to smooth you out. And George can smooth you out, and he can sell your rod.
Yeah, that's right. He's got you covered. So if you're struggling with your Spey cast, George might be a good guy to look up.
Yeah, George is a good guy, but George and Charles, I think are some of the best guys out there.
That's cool. Awesome. So yeah, let's keep on that 222. So top two. So you mentioned a bunch of tips, but let's think again. We're fishing that high water. The river is kind of coming down. Any other couple tips that come to mind that could help somebody find a fish?
Well, I'll tell you that my two best tips are the 5 and 5 T11 and a 2.5 floating, 7.5 sinking T14.
Okay.
Those are the two best tips that I use. And then I, of course, fluctuate between weighted and unweighted. And that should give you kind of a picture of the water I'm looking for.
And describe the 5 and 5 quickly, and then the other one. What is that exactly?
So I really like Motips, okay, because it's something I've been using for a really long time. So a 5 and 5. So you're going to have a lot of those Motips are going to be 10 feet long, which was the point of them, right? Mm-hmm. And so the 10 feet long is going to make sure that your casting stroke does not have to change with having a longer line or a shorter line. So it stays the same, but you have different sink rates. So a 5 and 5 T11 is going to be 5 feet of floating and 5 feet of sinking to equal 10 feet, plus of course your leader and your fly. Okay. And they're all color coordinated. So it's pretty easy to decipher, because the thing is, when people think about lines or talk about sink tips, it's something that's really confusing to a lot of people. And I've found that it doesn't get any easier than that system, just because it's color coded. Like, it's been around a long time. If you can't figure out that system, it's going to be tough going forward. So, but and then of course you got the intermediates. Okay. And the intermediates are nice, but I'm a huge fan of the floater, or the floating sections versus the intermediate tips, which are gonna swing through slower and dig a little deeper.
Yep. Gotcha. So you had the 5 and 5, and then what was the second one?
It was a 2.5. So it's a 2.5 foot floating section, and then a 7.5 foot sinking section. Yeah. T14. Mm-hmm. And then, like, most of the water out here, you can fish with that tip, whether it's deep or shallow, depending on what fly you put on as far as weight factor or unweighted, and then how you set your cast up, how many times you mend, where you put tension on your fly. Until you put tension on, it's pretty much gonna drop. And then it also could be lifeless also until you engage your swing. So, but those are my two favorite tips out here. Of course, the conditions change to where I'll use some much heavier stuff, and then rarely do I have to go lighter than that. But every now and then there's always a spot that comes out of nowhere where it's like I need the lightest thing possible, because I've rode over it 5 times, and 5 times there's been a steelhead there, and then the 6th time I've decided to fish it. You know what I mean? Yep. It usually doesn't take 5 times, but if I row over a place twice and there's a steelhead there, chances are the next time I'm down there, I'm going to be pulling in.
Yeah, that's it. Okay, cool. So, and on those tips, just briefly, we do talk about occasionally about just actual, fly fishing tip and sort of thing. Anything else you want to throw out there as far as, like, somebody's on the water and not necessarily the tip. Those are amazing tips, but anything else you throw out there to help them get into a fish?
Get into a fish. As far as tips, I would say probably fish a little deeper into a tail out than you're used to.
And how do you do that?
This is really simple. When you want to reel up and head back the boat, keep going at least 10 more. Perfect. And that's the problem, is that most guys, like, especially after a really long piece of water, like, if the water's too long, they'll get bored. Okay. So they'll start being complacent, and they'll want to reel up. They'll strip into cast halfway through the swing. And then the one thing, like, for example, a lot of times, like, the boats will go by that are nymphing or gear fishing, and then they pull up at a certain point because they'll start getting really shallow, and they're going to have to either go down a rapid. All right. Well, the first place those fish are stopping is right at the top of that rapid. So awesome. I would fish pretty deep into the tail outs. That's a really good piece of advice that I would tell people that want to be successful.
That's good advice. So
especially winter steelheading.
For winter steelhead, yeah. So when you feel like you want to get out, just basically did you say 10 more casts or 10 more steps?
Both.
Yeah, both.
Both. Yeah, don't just stand in the same place, but no, go into it. Go swing your fly into where the water really starts moving into the top of the rapid.
Oh yeah.
Because what you'll notice in a lot of places out here is there's really big boulders, kind of at where the next the rapid will start. Okay. And those fish they'll hang right there. How I know this is that I float over and I see them. Like I generally fish a spot and then I go float and I stand up and I look and a lot of the spots I find out here are places I just see fish and that's where they're going to sit. So, cool. and then you try and figure out how you're going to fish it. And a lot of those places they're gear spots. There's no waiting. So you can anchor up and then swing out of the boat. I do that a little bit out here in certain water conditions.
Oh, cool.
Yep. But yeah.
Cool. And any, do you want to throw one more tip out there for winter steelhead?
Diamond chop.
What is it?
Diamond chop.
Diamond chop.
Find the chop.
Oh, find the chop. Yep.
Find the chop. It was like there was a place on a river out here that I used to call the chop shop, and it was a really cool piece of water. It was really shallow, but the diamonds and the chop, man, they were really aggressive, and and fish were coming out of 2 feet of water. So if there's chop on top, it's like, think of it as a screen, as cover. And then, and generally it's a place where those fish have to stop. So fish deep in the tail outs, find the chop.
That's it. Perfect.
That's the two
those are
pieces I would tell.
Those are killer. Those are great tips for sure. And on resources, anything you want to recommend is, I don't know, books, magazines, websites, anything that would help somebody if they're thinking about the OP and fishing for winter steelhead?
There's have you followed John McMillan?
Oh yeah. John's awesome. Yeah.
John's great. He knows a lot about kind of this area, but I think his stuff is mainly focused on the environmental side of things. I mean, he's a hell of a steelheader.
Yeah. Well, the cool thing about John is, and I'll put a link to the show notes, is that John started a podcast as well.
Yeah.
And it's called it's part of the OP. It's part of the Barbless guys.
Mm-hmm.
And he talks. The cool thing about him is I didn't realize that he fished. He's kind of both gear and fly, which is cool. It's kind of like the more people I talk to on this, the more people I realize those that kind of go both ways are usually the people that are like innovating and stuff, right? Yeah.
Well, the thing is, like, when I first started steelhead, and I was fishing sand shrimp and eggs and pulling plugs, and it wasn't until and I would fly fish a lot, but it was always trout. And then instead it was George Cook that actually got me thinking about swinging a fly. And bait's really, bait or gear is really productive. Okay, where those fish are going to be sitting. Like a lot of times you can swing a fly in a place and you're probably not going to be down far enough, and your fly is not going to be in where it's supposed to be for long enough for them to react to it. Right? Those gear guys, they can change depths really easy, and they catch fish.
Yeah.
You cannot compare the numbers. When people tell me out here that the fishing's horrible, okay, and there's no fish around,
right.
All you got to do, I'll go talk to a couple of my buddies that are ringers out here with gear fishing, and they're going to give me a number. If it's a certain number, I know that they're telling the truth. But if it's not, like, chances are you just don't know where they're at, or you're just not being effective.
Yeah.
The gear guys get them.
They do. Before we get out here, did you want to throw one more? I know John McMillan. I'll put a link to his Instagram as well. Anything else that you want to just note to help somebody, maybe if they're?
I don't know too many books on this place.
Like, I don't think there's much in books.
There's no, and I always saw the books growing up, and it was like, it was the book that said, the Hoh River, and it'd tell you like put-ins and takeouts, but right. I didn't really read them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
Explorer.
I started, I was just exploring. I didn't even know where the numbers for shuttles around here when I started. I had a 9-foot pontoon boat and a bike, or I'd use my thumb.
Yeah.
You know, and I'd hitchhike back to my rig after a day of steelheading, and then I finally figured out their shuttles.
There's tons of good, like, camping is pretty decent up there too.
Camping's awesome. The summer right now is packed. Like the busiest time of year here is in March, and then in the middle of the summer. For example, I run an Airbnb on my house when I'm up in Alaska, and it's full all summer long. You know, so it pays the mortgage. Yeah, you have to reserve camping out here, you know, in the summertime. But the winter, it's a lot easier, especially if you come when it's raining. A lot of people will look at the forecast, and if there's too much rain, they'll just stay home. So if you're willing to slug it out and be damp for a few days, there's some great places to camp, and then some fish to catch.
That's cool. So is there a local fly shop? I mean, what is your local fly shop? Is there anything?
Oh, well, out here it's going to be Waters West, and a guy named Ed runs it. He took it over from a fella named Dave Steinbaugh, who was the original owner of that shop. Mm-hmm. Epic. It's got the greatest assortment of fly tying materials if you are especially a steelhead fisherman that I've ever seen. So they do a good amount of online business too. Oh, good. But yeah, it'd be Waters West. You know, back in Issaquah where I grew up, it'd be Creekside Angling Company.
That's right. Cool.
But Waters West has got, dude, they got so many materials. I mean, they have everything. And I generally send my clients there when they're, you know, when they come out here. Like, for example, they've never been out here before. I go, you know, take your time driving out here. Make sure you stop in at Waters West and take a look around. It's like Toys R Us to a fly tie or to a kid. You know what I mean? It's just, I mean, That's awesome. Give yourself a limit of how much you're going to spend too. Like I said, because you could go overboard in there with the materials. I mean, it really is top notch.
That's so. Cool. Right on, Trevor. So in the next 6 to 12 months, what anything new you got coming? I know that the COVID thing is really threw a wrench in, but anything else? I guess we don't really know, right? We don't really know what's going to go on.
No, well, nobody knows, but all I know is that people are going to be out fishing. Like I'm spending this time fishing a little bit and then working on house projects, but pretty soon we're going to have coho showing up, and then fall chinook, and then, you know, still summer steelhead, and then some cutthroat out here. So I'll be doing some of that stuff out here. Then just I'm really looking forward to putting 2020 in the rearview mirror, to be totally honest with you. No. Yeah, 2020. There's been cool things that have happened, but it's I don't think anybody, let alone the world or Americans, like to be out of their comfort zone of what they what they should be doing. You know what I mean? Like I feel bad for, so many people. You know, I mean, I've got my job's cut, but there are people that haven't been able to see their families that are, you know, or their parents that are dying or going to funerals or weddings or anything. So it can always be worse. So I'm looking forward to 2021.
Yeah, I hear you. Amen to that for sure. So if they want to find you, Trevor_Covich on Instagram is the best place.
Yeah, that's the best place. Or you can find me, you can write an email at opflyguy@gmail.com.
Oh, perfect. All right. Yeah, I'll put a link to all that in the show notes. And cool, Trevor. Hey, thanks for coming on. Just wanted to let you know, I appreciate you spend the time here. We didn't know exactly where we were going to go. And I think, you know, Alaska obviously is a big part of your thing. But it seems like when I talk about Alaska versus steelhead, it seems like more people are interested in hearing about steelhead, even though I've talked about it like hundreds of times. You know what I mean?
Dude, steelhead's it's a weird thing. If I had never done it, I would not have. I mean, I wouldn't have bought a house next to one of my favorite stretches of water. You know, I wouldn't be traveling. I'd probably have a pretty decent job with you know, a couple kids by now.
That's
I don't
right.
know.
What would you be? Know. Yeah. So listen, just to give you a minute here, if you weren't the OP Alaska, what would you be doing if you weren't doing that?
Dude, you know, I don't know. I'd probably be doing some kind of trade. You know what I always wanted to do is I always wanted to be a chopper pilot. I would really like to fly a helicopter, but it's because you can still do the same stuff. You're still taking people heli skiing and dropping them into the upper Skeena or something like that, or doing stuff around Hawaii. So it's good money. You get to meet a lot of different people and be in some really interesting places. And so I think that's kind of what drives me. It's not, I never wanted to be in a warehouse for the rest of my life. Like my parents tried to get me to work for Boeing, right? Because my grandpas, my parents, uncles, a lot of them, they all work for Boeing. My brother works for Boeing, and I just didn't. I don't want to do that. It's just not for me. It's for somebody, just not for me. I don't like traffic.
Yeah, no, I know. Yeah, you're up in. That whole Seattle thing is crazy. So
it's crazy, man. I drive right through it. Every now and then I have to stop for some construction out here or herd elk.
Yep.
And that's it.
That's it. I know. I was coming into our. I'm up on the North Coast in Oregon, and man, there's a traffic jam that was like miles long. And eventually, when we got to the top, we were like, "Oh my God!" There was a dozen of these beautiful Roosevelt elk just right off the side of the road, and it had backed up traffic for miles, but it was worth it.
Oh yeah, for sure. No, and in Portland, the Portland traffic. I find just as excruciating as the Seattle traffic. That's why I don't do it much. Or I pick the great thing about being a fishing guide, and like especially being a fishing guide when you've got some days off, is you can choose your times when you get to drive. You're not chained to having to leave at this time with everybody else, so you can kind of pick your windows. But I've been caught in so much evening traffic down there because I used to go fish with that guy I was telling you, Nick Rowell. He guides Clackamas and then the Nehalem, Trask, all those rivers, and I'd have to get to his house, and I was usually coming in the evening, and I was just like, good God.
All right, cool, Trevor. Hey,
cool,
thanks,
man.
Thanks again. Well, I'll let you know when this gets ready to go, and we'll check back with you then.
Right on.
All right, thanks a lot.
You take it easy.
So there you go. If you want to find all the show notes, all the links we covered, just go to wetflyswing.com/154. Have you ever thought about starting up your own podcast? I'm helping people get started at outdoorsonline.co/SAP. That's outdoors with an S/SAP. Start a podcast. You can find out how to start a podcast there with a super quick and easy checklist that walks you through all the steps of getting started. And this isn't just for fishing. If you have any passion that you love on the side, that could be knitting, dog walking, you name it. There's probably an audience out there that you could help serve. So it'd be great to see a new podcast. I love listening to them. If you have a podcast right now, reach out to me, Dave at wetflyswing.com, and let me know. I'd love to listen to a new show this week. So that's all I got for you. Really appreciate you for stopping by today, and look forward to catching up with you online or on the river.
Thanks for listening to the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show. For notes and links from this episode, visit wetflyswing.com. And if you found this episode helpful, please subscribe and leave a review on iTunes.